So, somebody, out of kindness, PM'd me on BGG, mentioning that I seem to be spiraling down in terms of my mental health, and there's kind of a, yeah, duh. But it's more than that. First of all, this is nothing new. All my life, I have been kind of on the edge of just teetering in terms of sanity versus not or whatever. And when I was in sort of those adolescent years, and this carried on to some extent or another, battery problems, it's carried on for some extent to another to through until sometime after I took up smoking. Violence factored into that. Either violent desires, simple sort of anger reactions like throwing stuff. By violent desires, I mean, along the lines of not like shooting up a school or something, but the idea of death by cop, which wasn't really a popularized phrase at that point. I remember when I first heard it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can remember thinking about that. But also just sort of these visceral, automatic reactions where I would just lash out. And I can remember that happening as early as 7th grade. No, earlier than that. Huh? Yeah, I think 7th grade is the first time I kind of really remember that. But it may have happened a little earlier, because that would put me at like 13, and I think it was already starting before that, at least to some small extent. And I think that's pretty common to some extent or another among teenagers, especially boys. But all that testosterone running through you that's new to you. You don't know how to cope with it yet. And at some point or another, I started to mellow out a little bit. And I really do believe that's when I started smoking heavily, is that I started calming down. Now, it may have just been a natural factor, and it may be, a coincidental relationship there, as opposed to any causality. However, after, I became addicted, I did find similar things, not so much violence, but my mind flying around too much and stuff like that when I would stop smoking for any length of time or whatever. And again, I can't tell you how much is addiction and how much is withdrawal symptom, or how much is the actual, there are some kind of advantages to me taking tobacco and nicotine or something that's in my tobacco into my system. Or maybe just the aspect of the oral fixation itself, although I satisfied that with like ice and drinking lots of water and stuff like that at other times. So, but once it became a real habit, my mind started settling down, and I could focus a lot better. That didn't necessarily mean I was any more effective at stuff. I could just concentrate better, which might be an ADHD or whatever it is type of thing. I don't know. I mean, there's good chances that I'm afflicted with that to some extent. But I think I found a treatment, right? But anyway, I always had, this sort of teetering in terms of, look, life is just, one misery after misery being aligned on top of each other, and these are remembered, and they hold, and they never go away, and they're just like these wounds that lash so deep into you and damage you so much, and there's not really any healing for me from them. I think most people are able to recover from the wounds a little bit easier than I am. And the pleasures, the good memories, certainly the times of just comfort or whatever, those don't last the same way, right? They really don't. Nearly everything that's kind of important to me, or that I look back on fondly or whatever, also has a really strong sense of like pain or disruption or something like that involved with it. Although it seems like that's the only way it can be, right? If learning, if memory and learning, if memory and pain and stuff like that are learning mechanisms that are intrinsically associated, it seems like that's how it should be, right? That we are born and designed to suffer, and that the suffering and avoidance of suffering is a big part of, how we learn things, right? How we learn not to make the same mistakes again. Well, and that happens even at a societal level, I would say, but it gets forgotten. So like, the suffering of the world wars, yeah, that lasted for a while, and we remembered for a while, like the suffering of the pandemic a century ago. We remembered for a little while, but not very long. It was kind of like, put it out of your mind as fast as possible or whatever. So I don't know if societies react quite as well. It may depend on what it is and how learnable better behavior that protects you exists. But I'm going off on tangents as always, right? When I was young, I turned to things that were not far from, I guess, what are kind of the hopes that religion provides. Equally ephemeral and non-provable beliefs that I could transit into different worlds if I only just tried hard enough. Even if it was just insanity, though. Like, I would admit to myself, look, there are people who like believe they're Napoleon or whatever. That may be enough to be able to force yourself into just sort of a different reality, at least as far as your own mind interpreting what's going on would be. Like, there's no insistence that it actually changed the world. It's enough that I change myself to no longer perceive reality as in the same way, but to change it so significantly that, it was more heroic or more attractive in some sort of way. I think kind of all along, I knew that wouldn't really matter. Like, but at least it would be an escape from the modern sort of, the problems of modernity, which always felt particularly problematic to me. Or the problems of society, well, of me within society, as I fight with my battery. And that by I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. Let's hide it from me so I don't see when it goes out. You know, that not having to deal with the problems that were plaguing me and to deal with other sorts of problems that maybe seemed more tractable, right? You know, like fighting for survival or whatever. In some ways, you're so busy doing that that you can't really reflect and can't really make yourself quite as miserable, although you might be lying there, you know, wounded or sick or something, and absolutely in a worse position. It's not that same sort of cerebral misery that feels like it has afflicted me throughout. There are other ways of coping. I obviously, look, the average person, I think, does not suffer in this way as much. Sure, you know, everybody has their crises, but is it there? Is it triggered as often? Is it triggered by commonalities like, you know, going to the store or doing anything or being awake? You know, I don't know. I don't think so, because I mean, you could just make the argument that they're stronger and put up with it. But I don't really think that's it. I really think that, like, they've got other mechanisms inside that prevent them from feeling that kind of deep-rooted, like, anxieties, miseries, just not fitting in with the world in any sense of the word. But obviously, given things like, you know, the opioid crisis and how people are reacting, you know, and seek an escape through something like that, it's not entirely uncommon either. I think there are a large number of people who just find that they can't cope with the situations as they are, and, you know, turn to some other way of dulling that pain of existence. And obviously, you know, like I said, I went to a semi-mystical type of solution for that, or a mystical solution for that. And other people have done that with religions, and have turned to their own fairy tales as opposed to the ones that I chose to take. Ones that, for me, you know, were more attractive because they weren't based on, well, first of all, they weren't based on authority or on any kind of social linkage, but also they just appealed in other ways. But then, so one of the biggest problems I've always had with religion is just, you know, how capricious any kind of God or whatever would have to be. You know, how immoral they would have to be to have inflicted this kind of existence on all creatures, right? If there was some sort of thing of that nature, boy, that's not something I could support, right? Like, everything in me just screams out, that would be so terrible, and I would have to fight that. You know, I would be on the side of Satan, there is no question, at least as given, you know, in certain writings, not but in sort of the Paradise Lost type of situation, yeah. You disobeyed me, therefore you're damned to eternal hell. And all your underlings and whatever are damned just because you wouldn't love me enough. Boy, that sounds psychotic, doesn't it? Now, the religious people have their answers to that. But anyway, the point is that I turned to something that was similar to that in some ways. Did I find comfort in it? No, I found a different kind of pain in that. A different kind of pain. There's no question in that. But it drove me towards doing some better things, I guess. Like, going out on really, really long walks. And things kind of like meditation or prayer or whatever you want to say, although in my case it was trying to break those barriers and disappear from this world into the next, whichever one I could create. And something in me has kind of always known that still wouldn't be enough, that the flaw is still in the perceptions and the processing and whatever. But on the other hand, I look towards it and say, yes, but those perceptions and those processings aren't just a matter of my way of thinking. They are the logical conclusions. They're where you have to come to. Like, it's I suppose if I could embrace an ever-changing existence rather than the desire for a static existence. But where do I feel comfort? I feel comfort when everything is the same and goes on like it does forever, and preferably there's no decline. But that's intrinsically in opposition to what reality is. And I suppose that's actually at the heart. You could look at something like, look, we're mortal, we're made, to deteriorate and die eventually, and boy, that just sucks, right? We might hit a peak at some point or another. I don't know when it is. I think it's probably somewhere around 6. And everything from there on is downhill. Some people may look and say, nah, it's at around 18, or no, it's around 28 or 30 or something along there. But that constant decline in and of itself wouldn't be that terrible if there weren't, like, one can get used to the boiling water, right? We're proving that. One can get used to everything that we believed in and that we took, pride and joy in, slowly deteriorating. But those big jarring shifts are where things go worse there, and that you realize that it'll never be as good. You get badly injured, or you lose loved ones or whatever. Those become so viscerally painful, and that just keeps going and lasting, and you can't keep your mind away from them, and you wouldn't want to, because they're a vital part of what you are. They're what you've experienced. What are you as a person? You're a bundle of habits and experiences. And if you start shunting those away, you stop being what you are. and identifying as what I am, that bundle of experiences and habits, that's the only damn thing that's special, right? I mean, it's special about all of us, but it's the only damn thing that makes us something of worth, right? Is that we are different, each of us individually in various ways. And to deny that bundle is to deny yourself. And that does not seem worth it, no matter what happiness, no matter what escape from misery, whatever that it gives you. Anyhow, as I was saying, I think there was always this feeling that, like, yeah, look, you know, these things that I wish, that I equate with religion or with the mysticism that's associated with religion, and I think come from the same sources, which is a desire to escape. I knew and could clearly see that deep down, no matter what they are, they would not be enough, right? But you can fool yourself. The same way as you can bury yourself in addiction, you can bury yourself in your belief structure. Anyhow, as to the specifics of my decline, I feel that it's been happening for a long time. And not just, say, since my wife died. I know that when I moved to this house, for the first year, there was still sort of some energy and some activity left in me. But it started declining rather rapidly. And I don't blame the house, although I know that this is the place I must die in, you know, for various reasons, mystical and whatever. I just know that this is where I must die, and in some ways, like my unwillingness to let someone have my blood, it just becomes almost a dictum that everything that maybe I shy away from anyway becomes almost a dogmatic response that I cannot allow anything that might disrupt that end goal. Whatever that is, you know? And why? Like, it's not like, ooh, I will be happy if I die here. No. It's just, like, it's just a sense that it must happen. And that if it doesn't, I've failed somehow in a more intrinsic way. And I did allow them to take my blood when I was in the hospital. That would be quite some time ago. About 15 years, I guess. Maybe more than that. Maybe, I don't know. In which I look back and I say, wow, you know, does that one failure, you know, did that free me? It did for a while. I let them keep taking it. I didn't have any say in the matter at the beginning because, you know, they had me on drugs and whatnot. But then eventually I turned back towards what, you know, I sort of firmly held before, and it just became a no, it's not going to happen. And it's kind of like, yeah, I'm terrified of leaving my house because even going out every Friday, I'm worried that, like, something will happen because I'm drunk as shit and whatever, and that I might end up in a hospital or somewhere not on this hill when I die. But that seems a lot more likely if I leave this town and I'm not in the house, like, you know, 98% of my time, right? It doesn't have to be inside the house. I kind of defined that it has to be within a certain radius of again, there's a nexus on my hill, and um, it has to be within a radius of that. My house happens to be within that. I don't know quite how far it extends, but I kind of have a feeling. Like, oh, if I got hit by a car here, if I crawl into the woods, I could die there, and it would be okay. That kind of reaction, which is very, very odd. Just the things the mind makes up to make something vaguely palatable or whatever. But and to some extent, I mean, look, like I said, I've always been teetering on the edge of able to do and not able to. And I've gone through periods where I'm really, really in bad shape. Really, really in bad shape. And I don't think that I ever saw that there was a way out in the deepest, depths of these. And then one would happen. But I always had more hope, right? Hope that something, whether it was the mystical side or, finding a relationship with someone that just, felt really good and made things happy, or just patterns in my life that worked better. The funny thing is, I know things that I could do that would make me better, or not better, I don't know, that would make me less miserable, but I can't do them. And I mean, some of these are really simple things, like be awake during the fucking daylight, right? Things are always worse when I'm sleeping all day and only awake in the dark and can't do anything, can't go outside and enjoy sunlight or walks or whatever. But even when I was up in the daylight more recently, I got limited amounts of stuff done. And I've also kind of, the peculiarities of my addiction have put me in a position where being up at night is easier. I gotta swap batteries. There have been times in my life where I avoided I hid in say activities and whatever that I would only do at night. Video games, reading, playing my games, whatever. But what ended up happening in those is that I ended up in a cycle where I would be awake, like more than a 24-hour cycle. I would be at like a 26 and a half, I think I figured it out at one point, hour cycle. So it would kind of shift throughout the day, and there would be periods when I could go out for walks and whatnot in the daylight, and then other periods where I couldn't. And that was okay. When I had nothing structured in my life. While I was working, I had the structure of, look, you got to be awake during working hours. So that meant that I was always being pulled back into that, into a particular cycle of hours in a week or whatever. And yeah, I might be really, really tired on Monday, but I usually ended up just catching up on my sleep on the weekends after going dancing or whatever, because I was doing that at the same time and just making, fitting my schedule to what I needed to do. Well, there's a couple of things now. One is there's the dancing, which always puts me at, look, you've got to be awake from, I leave the house maybe at 6:30 p.m. I get home at, who knows, it depends. It depends on whether or not, I'm walking or getting a ride. But if I'm walking home, I might be getting home as late as like 5 a.m., right? So that's one thing that's fixed in my life that just puts me in this situation. But then there's the video game as well, which really shouldn't do this to me, because I should be able to play it at any point. But the fact that there are certain times when things shift, I feel like I have to be awake for those times, and I haven't really figured out a way of letting myself flow the way I used to when I was kind of unhinged from a daily routine or whatever. Ideally, I would have a daily routine like I did at work, where I'm doing stuff every day during the daylight hours, where I make sure. But the problem is that it's only a duty to me, and worse than that, the payoff isn't that clear. Which is to say, okay, look, if I say to myself, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to cut wood every day, for the whatever amount of time that I spend on that. No. And, that would last me for a while still, because I don't get a lot done each day and whatever. That would have an actual, real, immediate kind of, yeah, I can see the gain from that, blah, blah, blah. And likewise with yard work, which, I got plenty to do. It's just on top of the wood that I never seem to be able to keep up with. Similarly, cleaning the house or whatever. I got plenty to do, but I never managed to get around to it. Except every now and then I'm like, wow, that's really disgusting. Let me take care of that. And taking care of it is like a 15-minute task instead of, really trying to keep things in good shape. But somehow the addiction or whatever positives it may provide me, which is, escape from the pain, are great enough that it just ends up dominating my life, right? But even before I lost my job, even before my wife died, maybe even before I moved back to Eugene, I felt that decline happening in a lot of ways. Just in terms of like becoming more and more ossified and less willing to do things. But again, that's happened throughout my life. Whenever I can settle into comfort, whatever comfort may be, it's a matter of, avoid everything, really. Just, I don't know. And those habits, that tendency is driving this into a deeper and deeper pit. where I'm less and less able to do the things that might help, right? Again, it might help if I got out more. But the moments of wonder and joy or whatever that come from doing things have grown more and more diminished. I have no one to come back and tell, the neat things that I saw if I go for a walk. I have likewise no one to impress, no one that I owe a duty to. And these things, this is the furthest I've been down that path, I think, where there's no obligations, where I've abdicated everything. And with that, instead of becoming the kind of person that I thought I would, for example, when I decided, screw it, I'm tired of looking for work that's just this major anxiety thing on me. I can afford to retire. Fine, let me do that. Well, it's not like I took up something new. If anything, I've pulled back further. I'm doing less gaming in some ways. Board gaming. Computer gaming doesn't count. Although, again, I've chosen one that's just like this consistent, forever addiction that's always demanding your time and begging for your money, but it's not going to get that. But it's not like I wasn't finding equally bad things to try to bury myself in. A lot of it was I would just be watching videos or whatever, or just having them on. I know the things that, like a psychiatrist would tell me, or a psychologist would tell me, look, you've got to do this. Yeah, I know what I've got to do. I don't need you to tell me. I know what would help. It's just not... It's like there's no reason, and the only thing that gets me to act anymore is an absolute emergency, and what is an emergency is pretty fucking, extreme, It really is for me at this point. It's like, yeah, I got no food. That's an emergency. Why? I don't know, because I like to eat, like I said at one point, I don't even know if I could fast anymore. It feels like everything's just wearing down, and everything that I would seek to make, that would be something that I would do as a exclamation point at a point of my life and say, okay, this means that there can be change again. The couple of times that I did a nice long fast, that's what it meant. And by nice long, I mean 2 weeks. I could, conceivably do something like say, oh, well, I'm just going to move. I'm going to give up this life and go to a different one. Or something along those lines. And that would shake things up. And it would probably be for the best in a lot of ways. Because when I moved here, it lasted for a year or so where I was really, really sort of energized and doing things. Not only did I do the move, I didn't think I could do it anymore, but I did the move here. I managed to, then faced with an emergency situation where my wife couldn't handle the noise at the apartment we were staying at, I managed to get a house and move to that and do some work around the house and you know, just slowly declined how much I was able to do. And that's kind of the whole thing, is like everything slowly declines into, well, wouldn't it be more comfortable if I didn't? If I just let, and that decline is like, that is where my tendency is, and maybe everyone's, because you think about how relationships go and everything, and how they just sort of grow staler, and the excitement goes away and everything, and some of it is because you're not trying anymore in the same way. Well, that feels like sort of the natural. It's like that which you fought to end up having should just be there forever after that. You know, you shouldn't lose the things you had to fight to get to. And I don't know. But it feels intrinsically wrapped up in where my problem is and whatnot. And there's like, I don't know. There's just nothing to push me onward to wanting to do. You know, or even wanting to maintain, you know, like screw it with my health and stuff like that. With everything. Everything has just sort of drifted into a, yeah, I don't care. And I do, because I have to dose myself with my e-heroin regularly to keep the pain at bay, right? But I also and even the act of, like, you know, seeking help or whatever, that just sounds like too much. It really does. It's like, yeah, I already know what they're going to say. I mean, it would be an equally, I think, energizing and powerful thing for me to do, to like make an appointment to get new glasses so that I could use the glasses that are perfectly fine instead of these. Or, you know, to make an appointment to get my teeth started to be taken care of again, and just work towards that type of thing. I think those would be as empowering as, like, going to talk to some shrink or something, because I know what the results are. I know what I'm going to be told. I know that I'm not going to be able to follow those things or desire to or whatever. And to a large extent, it's because I know what the maximal bar is already, right? I'm well below that. And I'm at a point where whatever high points I had in my life, I'm not going to match those again. And they weren't all that good. I was still fucking miserable. And yeah, I mean, I've been to psychiatrists, psychologists. I don't know if I've been to psychiatrists. I think I have once or twice. They never prescribed me with anything. But I also would, like, vehemently refuse that. I don't know why, you know. I'm willing to get drunk. Willing to do this. But somehow, I don't know. It's like, yeah, I just don't trust that shit. I just don't trust it. I've seen the hollow shells they make out of people with the crap they pump into them, and how much less they are. But how is that different from me dulling my pain with a video game? Right? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway. I don't think I've gotten anywhere with this. It certainly wasn't what I expected to say. Good thing I don't go on scripts or anything. Yeah. Cheers.